Hello and welcome to Android Design in Action, the third episode of this awesome show. I'm Roman Nurek, your host. I'm broadcasting live from New York City, and we're joined to my right by Nick Butcher coming in live from London.
Hello. And welcome back from your holiday, Roman. I hope you enjoyed the show.
Thank you, Nick. It was quite an awesome holiday. We actually went to San Diego, which was nice. And I caught up on the show that you and Adam did last week. It was quite good. Very good job. So,
thank you.
For those of you that this is, I guess, your first time watching, Android Design in Action is a show where we basically look at some of the apps that were previously reviewed in the Friday App Clinic broadcast from Mountain View, and we take a look at them in more detail visually, kind of more from a design standpoint. And we also reimagine them, kind of give them a makeover, if you will. So today we're going to look at a few camera apps, specifically Camera Zoom FX and Glimmer. So let's just get right into it and start with our first app, Camera Zoom FX. So Camera Zoom FX is basically, it's a camera replacement that gives you tons and tons of additional features. It gives you special effects, things like overlays, things like borders, kind of like hipster filters. If you can see here, there's that kind of that effects button, and it also gives you a bunch of customizable settings for your camera, like zoom and flash and things like that. It also lets you customize the type of camera you use. So you can use, or the type of shutter, I guess. You could use a single shot. You could use kind of like a time lapse. You could use an interval or like a countdown, things like that. So we had a couple of comments on this app, a couple of visual comments, and I'll start, and then Nick will jump in as well. I guess the first couple of comments that I had visually are basically that there's a lot of controls on the screen, and you can see that there's some controls on the left and some controls on the right, and there doesn't seem to be kind of a strong kind of order or purpose for the placement of these controls. The other thing you can't really see here, but a lot of the assets were blurry and they weren't optimized for XHDPI devices, and this is something that we see pretty often, and it's something that's very easy to fix normally. And there's really also kind of a mixed bag of styling. There's kind of these faux 3D skeuomorphic elements on the right. There's these kind of gradient custom 3D elements in the top right, and then on the left you have kind of flatter icons. So the styling was really kind of interspersed. There's different kinds of styles throughout, so that was one thing that we wanted to kind of look into changing. And you'll see in the next couple of screens as we review those that there are also different styles for the different pop-ups and dialogues that come up. Also, you'll notice that there's the actually, Nick, do you want to say anything about these three little dots in the top right?
The button of shame.
The button of shame.
Yeah, so this is for developers who haven't yet optimized their application to run on devices with software navigation keys, and so you get this emulated button, and it's kind of ugly and kind of hard to hit, and doesn't really offer the best experience for your users.
Yeah, and any other thoughts on Camera Zoom FX, Nick, or should we jump into the redesign?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think the two major things for me was the kind of inconsistent styling, which wasn't really, the Android Hollow type theme that you would expect, perhaps, coupled with just some unclarity about what the iconography meant and how to actually use the app. I kind of found that if you just look at the screen, it isn't like too intuitive how to go about it. So let's see what we did with it.
Okay, so let's look at the redesign, and you can see here that most of the placement, I guess the general placement, having controls on the left and the right of the screen, we kept. But we did do a couple of things differently, and let me talk through all those individual points. So the first thing is that we wanted to simplify the mental model for users. We basically put camera and camera-related settings on the right. So you see all on the right, you see things like focus, change the camera, from front to back, take a photo, settings, and then zoom. And then on the left, we just put effects. So everything that is kind of the special sauce of this app the effects and the cool things you can do to your photos, we put on the left. So it simplifies the model for users. The other thing that we did, and you'll see this later on, is that we combined the settings here, this kind of shutter type setting, with other camera settings that were, I think, under this button. We combined that into a single affordance here, and we'll see an example of that in a bit. The other thing I wanted to point out is that we made the actual shutter button larger, and this is actually coming from feedback that Ian mentioned in the App Clinic last week, is that basically if you don't have, if you place something very close to a system button like the home button, users are very likely to hit that button accidentally. And so here what we did was we made the camera button larger, both horizontally and vertically, so the tap target is much more obvious. We also put up lights out modes that you hide the home button, the back button, and the recents button, so that it kind of doesn't crowd your vision. And another thing I'll mention is that we created, or we used more standard iconography throughout in a standard style. We used the hollow light style, or actually hollow dark style, on a semi-transparent action bar. So you'll see here that a lot of these icons are more common icons. I do want to point out that some of these icons are actually from AndroidIcons.com by Gunther Bayer. We mentioned Gunther's work in the first episode of the show. So a lot of these icons are from there as well. So thanks, Gunther. The last thing I want to mention is, I guess, actually there's a caveat here. You'll notice that there's these or not really action bars, there are these control bars on the left and the right, and they're semi-transparent. Now, if you've developed a camera app before, you may think, oh, it's not always the case that I can get a full screen picture or full screen view. So in those cases, when you don't have a full screen view, there are a couple of options. You can do letterboxing. You can also choose to make either the left or the right control bar fully black instead of semi-transparent. And there's lots of other options that you could do. I think in a very fancy case, you could even kind of start kind of mirroring the edges of the screen or mirroring the edges of the preview around the borders, things like that. Anyway, so that's the design at a glance. Nick, do you have any comments on the difference between the two?
Yeah, I instantly love the improvements on the shutter button, because you've managed to marry the kind of visual identity of the application. So if you go to this application's listing on the Play Store, it has these kind of colourful elements which you've picked out in the shutter button really, really nicely. And I'm also a big fan of using the overlay style, the semi-transparent kind of button bars as well, because it makes it feel like the picture is filling the whole window, which is, it's a camera app. This is what it's all about, taking a photo. So I love the way that we've extended that photo to fill the edges where possible. So that's two of my favorite elements.
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, one of the hardest things is getting a photo to fill. I actually don't know about Ice Cream Sandwich or Jelly Bean if we have this, but one option is, if you can, maybe even kind of crop the image so that you don't see the top and the bottom, or there's lots of different options, but that's just as somebody that's worked on a camera app before, it's definitely something that comes up. Like, it is kind of difficult to do, but if you can do it, your app can look really great. So let's move on to the next screen. In this next screen, you'll notice that we moved some of these kind of deeper nested effects pop-ups. Again, we moved effects from the right to the left to simplify the model for users. We moved this kind of panel to the left. And so when you select this edit control, you see basically this kind of secondary set of controls to its right. And in the original app, there's actually a third set, so you can imagine having 3 sets here. And at that point, you're really kind of thinking more about the controls and like kind of finding the thing you want than the photo. So maybe potentially kind of overlaying on top of the photo may be okay. But yeah, we didn't go too much in depth there, because at that point it's really up to the developer what they want to do. Mm-hmm. And I just want to, in the interest of time, I want to switch over to this screen, and this is where you basically select a shutter type. So you can go from a normal to a timer to I actually don't know what a collage does, but stable shot, lots of different shutter types, and that's really awesome. This is a pretty unique feature that it has all these different types. But again, we decided to move that into settings. So basically you touch settings and then touch normal shutter type and select which one you want. You can probably even improve that flow faster by having a special widget at the top, maybe one that horizontally scrolls. But that's just one way to do things like that. And the reason we did this was to really just simplify, again, really simplify this fairly complex app so that any types of settings related to camera go into one place. Nick, any parting thoughts for Camera Zoom FX?
Yeah, I love what you've done with this. I think it's a very powerful app which lets you do a lot of different things with images, but having its fairly kind of custom UI means it's quite hard to take in all those different options that you can do. So I think using things like the standard design language of the kind of hello icons and standard controls like spinners really makes it much quicker to parse and understand what's going on in the app and really get down to the functionality which you want to use.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so let's move on to the next app, and the next app is Glimmer. So I'll let Nick go ahead and jump into his thoughts on Glimmer.
So for those who missed the app, Glimmer is an application for letting you access photos on Flickr, the photo sharing website. It's quite a new app on the market, and some people might be surprised to see us addressing it in Android Design in Action, because overall I actually really like it. It's a really nice app. It's using a lot of the Holo design language. Things like horizontal swiping and so on are present. But as with any kind of Android design project, there's one aspect which you kind of have to consider, which I don't think they've really addressed too well, and that is designing for all different device variety out there. So I've actually taken this from a different standpoint than usual, and we've kind of run this on a 10-inch device on a tablet and looked at how it comes out, and then decided to apply some more Android design philosophy on how we could improve things. So moving to the first screen here, if you can make out, this is the first thing you're presented with when the user installs the application, is a kind of a log-on screen. It's quite sparse, minimally, extremely sparse. It just says welcome to Glimmer and then a log-on button. And I think this is a real missed opportunity. When a user installs your application, they don't always know exactly what it does or how high quality it is, and you've got a very short amount of time to impress them. In fact, if the first thing you show them is a sparse screen with a button forcing them to log in, it's almost like you're kind of throwing your hand up and showing a stop sign, and I'm sure there'll be a drop-off here, or a number of users just don't even persevere and carry on, and which would be a shame because they'll be missing out on a great application. So what we've done here is we've if you want to flip forward to the redesign, we've made content come to the fore and offered a different experience when you load in. So Flickr is about photos, right? It's all about showing photos. So the first thing you see when you launch this app, in my opinion, should be some rich imagery. Flickr exposes a feed called Interestingness, which shows some great imagery. So what we've done here is we've pulled out some images from that, and this is the first thing you now see. So instantly it's engaging. It speaks to what this app is all about. It's all about beautiful photographs. And what's more, it offers some functionality now without logging in. So there's a strong call to action there to log in with your Flickr account. But alternatively, we've got a little hint there saying that you can touch a photo, and so this will take you right into the core of the app, so viewing photos and seeing comments on the photos. So straight away, without logging in, we're exposing more content to the users. And also, we hope you agree that it looks a little bit better, taking advantage of the extra screen real estate available to you on this larger device.
Yeah, and the one thing I want to point out here, Nick, is that Nick did the design for this app, and one of the things that instantly makes your app look better, and we've done this in past episodes of the show, is just using different weights of Roboto, different parts or different fonts in that family. So in this case, Nick, you've used Roboto Thin, is it?
Yeah, Roboto Thin and then regular.
Yeah, so using Roboto Thin is, I just want to point out, it's really great for really large type. So if you have something like an initial screen that says welcome, or you want to display a nice big piece of text, especially on a tablet, for like 48, even 64, 72 scale independent pixel sizes, Roboto Thin is really awesome.
Cool.
So let's move on to the next screen, and this is the screen where, actually, Nick, you want to talk about it? It's the sets screen, is that right?
Yeah, so once you get into the app, once you've logged in with your Flickr account, it offers some different views on your data. So you can see your photos, your sets, which is kind of like collections of your photos and folders, if you will, as well as seeing groups and things from your contacts. So I've pulled out the sets screen here, because as you can see on the tablet, you get these kind of horizontal full width images, which just really don't scale up too well to a larger device. So we've looked at that, and we've applied a different kind of layout to really take advantage of the real estate available to you. So
yeah, so I've just moved over to the redesign screen. I just want to also point out regarding those full width widgets. Basically, anytime you have anything that's full width on a tablet, you have to think twice about it. Basically, because I mean that's just a lot of space. Not even for lines of text, but even photos. Photos are very, very rich, right? But when you have such an awkward aspect ratio, like a fixed height in a full width row, you don't really kind of get as much out of it. So yeah, so Nick, do you want to talk about the redesign?
Yeah, so there's a few things we've done here. Firstly, we switched over to a dark theme as well, as we showed on the login screen. The thinking here is really that, as we were saying before, we want this to be all about the photos, all about the imagery. Having a darker background really lets those images kind of stand out, really makes them kind of pop. So that's the reasoning for switching over to the fully dark rather than the light theme with the dark action bars we saw before. I've also moved away from the horizontal swiping tabs, the swipey tabs, because that kind of very long gesture on a tablet device is kind of a bit hard. It isn't as intuitive, I find, for switching between pages of content. And by pulling the tabs out right into the action bar, where we have more space now in this size, it gives you instant access to switch between those four major views of your data.
Yeah.
So the other thing we've obviously done there is we've gone for a grid view to get more to make better use of the real estate, and switched it up from vertical to horizontal scrolling. So as you can see, the images are kind of going off to the right, so we can scroll horizontally and see more. This screen is quite heavily, I guess, influenced by the standard Android gallery and applications like Google+, but we really hope we've kind of captured the spirit of Flickr and married it with like a really rich kind of viewing environment. Some other minor details which I wanted to call out as well is we've de-emphasized some of the visual information. I found using the Glimmer application that there was a lot of information jumping out at you, competing for my attention from the photos. So, for example, if you look at the visual treatment of an individual set here, like a folder, we've made it, 90% almost about the picture, and then there's a very small kind of call out saying the name of the set, and then less important, secondary importance, we've kind of like de-emphasized the number of photos in the set. So we've used this kind of relative size and kind of weight of text and color to show the relative importance of the information there. So I think this really makes the photo stand out, and then if you really want to know how many photos, it's easily accessible, but it doesn't compete for your attention.
Two things I just want to call out specifically that I like about the changes here, Nick, is just in terms of padding and font treatment or text treatment. You've given the text, like in this case, waves, right? That's the title of the set. You've given it slightly more padding around the top, bottom, and especially the left. And using, either 4, 8, or 16 dips of padding is usually a good idea. And I think that just helps clean it up a bit. In the previous or in the current version of the app, you'll notice that these text labels, and it's very hard to see, I apologize for that, but these text labels, they're kind of scrunched over to the side and kind of squeezed by the top and bottom borders of that semi-transparent black box. So giving it some more spacing just helps bring it out ever so slightly so that it's a little more legible.
Great.
So let's look at the last screen, and this is the photo detail screen. Basically, when you touch a photo, you jump into this screen, and there it's basically a full screen photo and gives you a couple of actions at the top. Nick, do you want to jump into your analysis?
Yeah, you could probably skip on to the next slide as well. There's
sure.
It's quite a simple screen, really. It's showing you the photo, but there's a few things which I wanted to change about the screen, really. Firstly, I changed over to using an overlay action bar. I hope it comes out in the screenshot here. So that's basically I wanted the screen to be all about the picture. I didn't want the border at the top. I wanted to feel like the photo was the most important thing. If you've used the application as well, you can tap on the main picture and it will hide the action bar, but it actually has a slightly jarring animation when it readjusts the size of the image. It's doing another layout pass. So using an overlay action bar will negate that issue as well. The other thing is, if you look at the title of the photo, it was kind of burned onto the photo in the image. So even if you go into the kind of the kind of viewing mode where you hide the action bar, the title was still kind of part of the image. So I've changed that. I've kind of removed the Glimmer name from the action bar, because I think by this point you're using the app, you have the icon, you kind of know which application you're in, and just replace the title with the photo title there.
Yeah, I think providing that kind of that sense of place of where you are, that's really what that part of the action bar is for, is to tell you, not only where you can go and what you can do, but where you are. And so the action bar does have a built-in title and subtitle feature, but in this case, Nick has chosen to kind of use a custom title area that kind of highlights that it's a certain photo by the author of the photo.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's move on. Yeah, sorry, go on.
The only last minor thing is I kind of cleaned up the iconography in the action bar as well. I feel like the functions it's offering here, like favoriting, sharing, these are all quite common iconography. So I felt like it cleaned it up having it as just icon rather than icon and text, because you still have the long press to get a tooltip, as it were, if you don't quite understand what's going on. But I just felt like it removed all those distractions away from the photo and just simplified.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's look at the other facet of the screen, comments. Do you want to talk about that, Nick?
Yeah, lastly, tapping on the comments button or the information button led to these kind of pop-ups which overlay the photo, kind of obscuring it out the way. And I decided just to give that a bit of a treatment. I wanted to carry on that theme that content is king here. It's all about the photograph, so I went for an overlay style again. So I hope it comes out that this is supposed to be like a semi-transparent pop-up box that comes up. And it's almost like a toggle mode. So you can see here, when you've hit the comment button, this panel will pop up. And the idea here is that that'll stay up. So as you kind of keep on horizontally swiping to the next photos in the set, that'll stay up and it'll just kind of switch over. Similarly, if you hit the info icon next to it, the idea is it would occupy the same space. You could have the fun animation with it, perhaps rotating around, showing you some information about the photo. And what we've done here is I feel like having this overlay information rather than an obscuring pop-up, it really takes better advantage of the screen real estate available on the tablet, because you can still see a large amount of the image, which is what this is all about, and then get your comments experience as well.
Yeah, awesome. And I especially like just the treatment of comments and text. So basically, within the comment, you have the author, the comment author, and there's lots of different things you can do to make text seem clickable or touchable or interactive. Basically, having it stand out, giving it some color is one sign, one indication. But another thing you could do is you could potentially use underlines. You could also just have, if you choose, instead of having the kind of the quick contacts, you can have the profile icon actually jumpy there as well, if you decide that quick contacts isn't for you. But yeah, so
if the author's watching, this is also a subtle hint that this application already kind of like in the background checks for new photos from your Flickr friends. I'd love them to implement a contact sync adapter so that it joins up between contacts and the Flickr profile, so that you can use these quick contact badges to quickly pivot from other applications into their Flickr profile and so on and so forth. I love it when applications integrate like that.
Yeah, basically anytime you have any sort of social app, you should do things like contacts integration. You should do things like social stream API integration. That really kind of helps you integrate even further into the app, into the OS actually. So let's move on from the redesign of Glimmer to a new section of Android Design in Action, Android Design News. And you guys did cover this last week, but we do want to kind of help kind of promote some of the awesome work that's been done in the community. And so this is kind of a section that we're hoping to do potentially every week for the show. And so let's start with Android Design News. In the first bit of news, actually, Nick, do you want to start with the first bit of news?
Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight an excellent library, some assets which Cyril Mottier of Green Droid fame has open sourced to the community. He's made some some map markers for making map pins, which are very, very true in nature to the kind of Google Maps style. So these don't actually ship with our Maps SDK. So these are some great assets for getting you bootstrapped or customizing from there. So thanks very much, Cyril, for sharing these.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Cyril. The next one is from Smashing Magazine. And Smashing Magazine, for those of you who aren't aware, it's a magazine that's dedicated to teaching the world basically about different aspects of design and also implementation. So if you're a web developer or an Android developer or a web designer or an Android designer, Smashing Magazine is a great blog to follow. They often highlight some of the best stuff that's going on in the industry. In this case, what they've done is they've highlighted some mobile sketching templates. They've actually released mobile sketching templates for Android, iOS, Windows. I believe it's also tablet and phone. So if you're interested in doing some sort of kind of real world sketching with real pen and real paper or pencil and paper, then this is definitely something you should go ahead and download.
That's what I used when I was doing the sketches for Glimmer. So
nice, awesome.
There we go.
Awesome. Next is a similar kit from Taylor Ling, who is one of the awesome community folks that's kind of creating free downloadable assets for the rest of us. It's a GUI sketching kit, basically very similar to the previous kit, but it's from Taylor. Any thoughts, Nick?
Yeah, these are nice. I found the first of Smash Magazine maybe slightly heavyweight. I found myself it was clearer using Taylor's ones. They're not quite so heavy, so your sketch actually stands out over the frame rather than the Smashing one. So take a look at them both, see which ones work for you.
Awesome. Okay. In other news, Android Niceties, or is that how you pronounce it? Niceties? I think it's Niceties.
Yeah.
So Android Niceties, which is a blog that, or I guess a Tumblr blog / it's a media outlet, I suppose, that highlights awesome design work in the world of Android. Celebrates its first birthday. I think this blog highlights some of the most awesome stuff that's coming out of the community. You should all try to follow it if you're interested in seeing examples of some of this stuff in action.
Yeah, happy birthday, Abhilash. I'm probably murdering your name, so it's probably Coop is easier to say as your name on Twitter. So yeah, keep up the good work. We love your blog.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is lastly, Nick, do you want to talk about Marie's awesome redesign of Rich's app?
Yeah, I think inspired by some of the comments from the App Clinic and some of Roman's redesigns from last week. Marie has joined in the spirit of the redesign movement and has applied the Holo treatment to the Ultimate Stopwatch application by our colleague Rich Hyman. So she shared all the assets and everything. So it's a great example of taking a before and after shot like we've done. So do check it out at the link.
Yeah, I especially love the work that she's done with taking something like a stopwatch and making it tablet friendly. One of the things that that folks sometimes have trouble with is imagining, is my app really useful on a tablet? Does it make any sense on a tablet? And in general, the answer is yes. Because it's just when a user has both a tablet and a phone, they'll expect that when they jump to their tablet, the version of the Google Play Store on their device that they see on a tablet is basically going to be the same thing on the phone. So if they happen to love your app on a phone and it's just not available on a tablet, or it doesn't look very good, or it's not really optimized for a tablet, they're kind of going to think twice about using your app next time. They may use a competitor's app on a tablet. So in this case, Marie's just taken a great great step in taking something that really is more like a square thing, like a stopwatch, a clock is really kind of a square thing, right? What do you put on the sides of it? There's a lot of white space, and she's taken that and kind of merged different parts of the phone app into a single screen, so that you kind of have like a dashboard of your different stopwatches.
She also, very fully aware of the Fragments API, so it's a great way of showing how to do designs for the Fragments way of thinking as well. So check it out.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all we have for the show today. Tune in next week where we will cover, I believe, travel planning, or I think it's travel planning apps. We'll have to see what the guys in the App Clinic go through, which apps they review. So we'll take a crack at some of those and review them, or actually redesign some of the screens from those apps. So thanks for tuning in. As always, I'm Roman Eric, and with me here today was Nick Butcher from London. And thanks, and hope to see you next week.
Bye.